You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. All right, earlier today, Eli Holstein out of Zachary made his pledge. He will be a member of the Alabama Crimson Tide's class of 2023. Previously had been committed to Texas A&M, decommitted, has now chosen Alabama. So he stays in the SEC West, a Louisiana prospect heading to Tuscaloosa. Here to talk about it, Shea Dixon, our buddy from Geaux247, makes sense of it all. Shea, thanks as always for the time, man. How are you?
Absolutely. I'm doing well. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing really well. Thanks, man. Let's first start with a reaction to the Holstein news. Was this a surprise that he picked Bama?
Not at all. I mean, even back when he was committed to A&M, which he'd kind of shut things down early, was one of the first national, one of the top quarterbacks nationally to have his dominant drop whenever he committed to A&M. But even then, he was being recruited heavily by Bama, and when he backed off, that commitment reopened things. The consensus feeling was that Alabama, at that stage, they had been after some other quarterbacks, but they were kind of down to Arch and Eli as two of their kind of top targets, and Arch had set some visits for June, but wasn't a big surprise to go ahead and see them pop Eli now and take him as the quarterback in the class. And I know he had made the visit to LSU a week ago, and it was the first visit he's made, certainly with the new staff, but even dating back to the old staff, he hadn't been on campus in a year, more than a year probably. So it was a foregone conclusion, to most people who follow recruiting, that he was going to leave the state. It just was a matter of which school, and it was kind of no surprise that it was going to be an SEC West school, because that was being committed to A&M, heavily recruited by Bama. Florida from the East was kind of in there, and obviously LSU tried to get in. So he was going to end up at an SEC school regardless.
Why, Shea? Why was that such a foregone conclusion for Holstein to end up at an SEC school out of state?
I think from an LSU perspective, I'm saying it was because it just didn't seem like he ever showed much interest in, kind of taking off with LSU in the recruitment process. I mean, he had an offer from the old staff, obviously, when the new staff comes on. Joe Sloan had recruited his brother, Caleb, and signed him while he was at Louisiana Tech as the OC. So he knew the family and was recruiting them. And, he stopped by Zachary. They've got a number of D1 players on their team. So beyond that one visit, or I guess he made two visits, came by over the weekend and then came back on a Monday a couple of weeks ago. Beyond that was the first visit he had made really through the heart of his recruitment, for a year plus. So just the fact that he's a Zachary kid and wasn't ever kind of coming around LSU made it clear that, he wasn't playing any games with it. It wasn't like he was visiting LSU every weekend and suddenly popping for Bama. It was just, look, it's pretty evident early on that this is the guy who's going to leave the state.
Shea Dixon's with us. He's on Twitter at Shea Dixon, Geaux247. Okay, so the obvious then domino is, well, Arch Manning seemed to be down to 3, right? It was Texas and Georgia and Bama. Well, if Eli Holstein is now on board with Bama, does that mean Arch is down to Texas and Georgia?
I don't think necessarily. I think that Arch will go wherever he wants to go, and whether that school has a quarterback committed already or not probably won't sway him one way or the other. But at the same time, I think that Bama's reading this is probably, hey, look, we're in the top 3 for Arch, but if we're sitting 3, do we go ahead and close on a quarterback? And they had been high on another kid, Nicholas Imaliva, who ultimately committed to Tennessee. He had gotten kind of a lot of traction because of a supposed big NIL deal. You recognize the name. He'd been in the news a bunch. But for them, I think it was, hey, look, if we're going to wait around and potentially miss on Manning, do we go ahead and kind of lock up a guy right now that wants in the boat? And Holstein was that guy. So I think it probably shows that, and I didn't think that Bama would get Arch. I thought that Georgia and Texas were kind of the two teams out front. So kind of not a big surprise, no matter which way you slice it, that, Bama went ahead and said, okay, let's kind of move on. We'll keep swinging for Arch. If he wants to visit, great, but you've got a quarterback in the boat now.
Shea, the obvious next question then becomes, okay, well, what about LSU? You had 2 real blue-chip prospects in the state with Arch and Eli Holstein. They're both obviously, it would appear, I don't want to completely dismiss Arch Manning. It just doesn't seem like LSU is going to be the destination. Well, actually, let me not miss that point. Is LSU going to continue to pursue Arch Manning at this point?
I think you continue to pursue Arch Manning in the same way you continue to pursue Eli Holstein, over the past year, even when he wasn't dropping in for visits and all of that. When you've got a kid of that caliber in your state, you recruit him, you talk to him, you call him, you go to his spring game, you do all that. But at the same time, these guys have been around the block. Joe Sloan, Brian Kelly, Den Brock, everyone who's involved in recruiting quarterbacks can kind of say, okay, look, we need to go ahead and build out the board and not put all of our eggs into one basket. And I think smartly they've done that. I think they've got about 5 or 6 quarterbacks, Matt, that I would say that they've consistently recruited, and they've got kids on official visits, and they've brought them in. And Eli and Arch have been in that group. But remember, and this rarely happens, and I think it's probably because we're caught up on the reality that Arch is the number 1 player in the country, and he's a Manning, and he's in Louisiana, but it's not a state that churns out quarterbacks a ton. We've talked about that over a decade on the radio together. But it's not just Arch and Eli. Ricky Collins at Woodlawn is the number 12 quarterback in the country. So 3 of the top 12 quarterbacks in the country are in Louisiana right now. So LSU's kind of gone after all 3 of them, and then Dante Moore and Jaden Rashada are a couple national kids out of Michigan and California. Moore, who is pushing, he's up there. I think he's the number 2 quarterback in the country right now. But those guys are both top 10 overall prospects, and Moore visited already for an official and an unofficial. Rashada's taken an unofficial and will be by on an official in June. And I think if you're not getting one of those guys, then you continue to press for Ricky Collins. And in my guess, that would probably be the quarterback they wind up with in the class. And for me, that's a win. If you're keeping a Louisiana kid at home who is a top 150 prospect and has LSU and Oregon and all these other offers, at the end of the day, you're getting a pretty good quarterback.
Ricky Collins is the Woodlawn High School prospect who is committed to Purdue right now. So, Shea, don't let me miss that point. If LSU, are you suggesting that if LSU wanted to flip Collins, that would be something that would be feasible?
I can't speak to where Ricky's going to be at in this process, but I know this: they're recruiting him just as hard as they are the rest of these guys, and I think they've known that, hey, at the end of the day, we need to end up with one of these kind of 5 or 6 guys, and Ricky's been in that group. So I don't know if that means automatically, hey, just because I'm committed to Purdue and a big school like LSU comes, that I'll flip. But for a kid being from Baton Rouge, if LSU's going all in on him and kind of selling him on, the new program, the offense, obviously the athletes that he'll have at his disposal on that side of the ball, same pitch they're making all these guys at quarterback, that would be kind of tough to pass up, especially when you've got all your family here and everybody would be able to see you. So I do. I think that if they don't come away with a Dante Moore or Jaden Rashada or Ricky Collins, I would be pretty surprised, because I think that they've kind of cast the net wide enough to where they're not going to get left at the altar with nobody, I should say.
LSU will take a quarterback in 2023. Yes, that's safe to assume.
Yeah, I think in this day and age too, Matt, that everyone, you're going to take one every year. And if you don't, it's probably either because A, you put all your eggs in one basket and came up snake eyes, or B, you're in that maybe rare spot. Either you've got a transfer portal guy in the off season, you don't need one, or that maybe you've got some 5-star out there for the next class that you're sitting here saying, hey, look, we've got a buffer year now. We didn't take anybody. You're the guy. But no, I would fully expect LSU is going to try to take a quarterback this class.
You mentioned, all right, last thing, you did mention a couple of the other national prospects, if it's Dante Moore or Jaden Rashada. Can you give us a little thumbnail on those guys, those top uncommitted guys that are out there, and where LSU might stand with them?
Yeah, so Dante Moore's from Michigan, and most people feel like the battle is going to come down, or at this current spot, is LSU Notre Dame. And it's funny because I've maybe referenced LSU Notre Dame battles in the past, but nobody really cared when you say that. If they go to Notre Dame, who cares? You're never playing them. Now suddenly it holds some real weight. It's like, oh, okay, LSU versus Notre Dame battling for a big kid. Let's see how this one unfolds. So that one's got some intrigue. And then Rashada has already visited Kiffin and those guys at Ole Miss. LSU's in the mix. Miami's in there. But I'll say this, A&M's going after Rashada. A&M's going after Dante Moore. And even Matt, with the public kind of back and forth of Saban and Jimbo, I still think that A&M is not going to slow down on the NIL trail. And if that's kind of a bargaining chip for any of these top national quarterbacks, then I won't be surprised at all if somehow they pull away with one of those guys. So it'll be interesting to see. I think Billy Lucci even tweeted about this, and it made me laugh that on the day that all the Jimbo Saban stuff was happening, he said, "Man, people are mad now, but wait how mad they'll be this summer when when A&M pops 3 or 4 more 5-stars and everyone throws up their hands again." So I don't think they're slowing down on that front, and certainly the quarterbacks come into play there.
Yeah, but Shea, only one of their early enrollees has an NIL deal.
Well, it just depends on when you're listening to Jimbo talk. At times it's none, at times it's one, at times it's I don't know anything about that. It just depends on what hour of the day you're catching them.
Shea, I mean, listen, you know that I don't live, eat, breathe, sleep recruiting the way you do, of course.
Good for you.
But Shea, it sounds like the way that I've said it, it sounds like there's a guy sitting here trying to convince you that it's like Kyrie trying to convince you that the earth is flat. It's like, no. Like, we all know the earth is round.
I don't understand why Jimbo didn't respond. We played within the rules. Look, I don't, y'all don't love the rules, so be it. I'm sure they'll change over time, but we played within the rules. Instead of this, this rhetoric of, hey, look, these guys just want to be Ags. At the end of the day, they just want to be Aggies.
The greatest class in the history of recruiting after an 8-4 season. For a program that hasn't won a championship in 80 years. Makes perfect sense. Whatever. Shea Dixon, Geaux247. He's on Twitter at Shea Dixon. Shea, you're the best, man. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Anytime, Matt.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.